Today I Learned Bitcoin, where we both teach and get taught about Bitcoin to help you no matter where you're at on your journey. Super excited for today's episode because if you're watching or listening to this, congrats. You've probably bought some Bitcoin or are maybe thinking about getting some. And you might be wondering, like, now what? What a lot of people don't know is that if you actually leave your Bitcoin on an exchange, you actually don't own it yet. There's this saying that, you know, in Bitcoin, not your keys, not your coins. And that may be something completely brand new to you, or, maybe you're hesitant because being your own bank is actually something completely new. So there's a couple important things to understand, like, the difference between a hot wallet versus cold storage. And, there's even more secure options like multi-sig. So luckily today we have an amazing guest. We have Tom Honzik. He's actually the concierge technical director over at Unchained. He's very kindly donated his time to teach us the importance of self custody, a bit about how it works, what your options are, and how companies like Unchained can actually help with these things. So, as always, I am joined by my amazing friend and co-host Jason. How you doing today, brother?
What is up, my guy? Super pumped to be here.
Likewise, we've got Tom here. How we doing, Tom?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time. If you wouldn't mind, just for everyone tuning in, I went over your title, but love to hear a little bit of an intro. Just you know, maybe about your Bitcoin journey or what you do over there at Unchained. Just a quick intro for everybody.
Okay. Yeah. So I started taking Bitcoin seriously not super long ago. It was in like 2020, but I saw Bitcoin coming back in price from that 2017, 2018 run. I thought maybe it was just a fad, but obviously it was making a resurgence. And so I figured I needed to look more into it. And then I just sort of fell down the rabbit hole, so to speak, and started learning more and more and became kind of obsessed with it. That brought me to wanting to work in the Bitcoin industry. And so about a year and a half ago, I was lucky enough to get a position with Unchained Capital. We are actually now just Unchained. But yeah, we help people learn how to custody their Bitcoin safely, to remove custodial risk, as well as minimize single points of failure from people just making mistakes, losing, an item that they're supposed to keep track of. And so what I specifically do is educate clients that sign up with Unchained. So I get on calls, one-on-one calls to help people set this up properly, make sure that they are very comfortable and confident with holding their own keys to their own Bitcoin. And I also do premium support. So people that are already clients and they run into any technical questions, I'm there helping out.
That's awesome, man. I mean, I'll disclose I am a customer of Unchained. They're freaking awesome. They literally, you could have close to zero knowledge about Bitcoin. They'll make you feel safe and comfortable, walk you through step by step. And it's actually like a super educational process. So we appreciate you. We appreciate Unchained for what y'all are doing. And yeah, I mean, just to, kind of kick this thing off, like I know, there's a couple different ways to buy Bitcoin out there. Obviously, I think, that's something you guys offer there at Unchained as well, right?
Yeah, so people can not only custody their Bitcoin with our solution, and it is self custody, and we can get into why that is, but we also help people buy Bitcoin, and we also offer Bitcoin IRAs and Bitcoin backed loans. So that's like our suite of products.
Very cool. For the average person, they're probably using something like Coinbase, right? Maybe Robinhood, these standard apps that have been out there for a while that are super easy to use, nice and flashy, things like that, right? So if I went and just bought some Bitcoin on Coinbase, what should I be doing next?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. Most people approach Bitcoin from a recognition that it's an alternative monetary tool as opposed to the typical fiat money that they're used to using. And Bitcoin is appealing because obviously it has some resistance to the problems that fiat money has, right? It addresses inflation and censorship and confiscation. So people become interested in rotating some of their wealth into Bitcoin. And so what do? They look up, how do I buy some Bitcoin? And probably, I haven't tested this recently, but if you Google that, you're probably going to end up at like Coinbase or something like that, right? And so people download the app, they throw some money in, they buy Bitcoin, and then it just sits there on Coinbase or the exchange. Now, that's actually a problem in the Bitcoin world because there's a very key difference between custody of Bitcoin and custody of something like US dollars. People are used to using like banks and brokerages that hold their dollars for them, and they get used to that. And it's an acceptable model in the fiat world because there are government programs like the FDIC and the SIPC, which kind of insure people if the custodian loses their dollars for whatever reason. Essentially, the government could just, create more dollars out of thin air to meet that obligation. And they do that, right?
We know
But
that, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And, with Bitcoin, most people tuning in probably know there's a 21 million limit. There's a very strict supply cap, and more Bitcoin cannot just be arbitrarily created. So that means that if you are trusting a custodian with your Bitcoin and they are irresponsible or nefarious and they lose or steal your Bitcoin, there's not an easy way to just get that Bitcoin replaced, right? There's no guarantees or insurance like that. So people need to take self-custody of Bitcoin. They need to avoid custodial solutions. And really what that means is holding their own keys. So do you want to get into that next, or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but just
Go
real
ahead.
quick, I wanted to jump in here because as we're talking about like keeping money on Coinbase, it's so fresh to me because like yourself, Tom, like I rode that 2017 wave. That's what got me into, I'll say, crypto at first, and that evolved more recently into Bitcoin specific. But literally thinking back a year ago, I thought keeping that on Coinbase was what you did. Right, like I thought that was it. And I had the app and everything was safe and secure, and it was just like checking, like my Wells Fargo or JP Morgan Chase Bank app, right? The money's there, it's secure, I don't have to do anything with it. And I kind of underwent in the last year or so the process of learning like I don't own any of that until I own it. And like there's kind of like this responsibility of being your own banker in the Bitcoin world. And that's what self-custody is all about. And that's the most safe and secure way to hold your Bitcoin. And that was a huge transformational process for me. And now as I use Swan Bitcoin, no longer Coinbase, I like get antsy just watching that dollar figure accumulate before the auto withdrawal hits. I'm like, oh man, that's like 500 USD. I really want to get that off and get that transferred to my cold wallet now. So it's funny like how drastically your outlook changes once you understand that dynamic. And so this is such a valuable topic, you guys.
Yeah, the mental model that a lot of people approach it from is probably like along the lines of a brokerage. They see like Coinbase as like a brokerage and it's offering all these different cryptos, or which the analogy would be stocks, right? And at a brokerage, on your like brokerage app on your phone, you are keeping everything there. But that insurance issue is really the key difference, and why it's a lot more dangerous to be keeping your Bitcoin on an exchange. I think you made a really good point about that you don't really own the Bitcoin even if you don't have it in self-custody, because really ownership of Bitcoin means the ability to move the Bitcoin and spend the Bitcoin, right? And in order to do that, you need keys. So I think you mentioned earlier the motto is not your keys, not your coins. And so if you don't hold your keys to your Bitcoin, then someone holds the keys and it's going to be Coinbase's keys, right? So they're the actual owners of the Bitcoin. And what you have when you trade dollars for Bitcoin on Coinbase is you have an IOU for Bitcoin. Okay. And what you want to do is trade in that IOU for real Bitcoin because, if we're right about Bitcoin and it's kind of the savior to your wealth in the coming decades or years, then you're going to want to make sure you still have it, right? We don't know. We know that Bitcoin's probably going to be around, but we don't know if Coinbase will be. So it's important for the security of your wealth.
We know that FTX isn't, right? So, and that's another point here is like, yeah, Coinbase is kind of the household name, I think, for a lot of people, but there's some big exchanges out there that take that IOU and they put it in front of their customers, but then they're doing other things behind the scenes with that actual Bitcoin. And when you go to cash in on that IOU, guess what? Your Bitcoin's not actually there. And that's what we saw happen with FTX at the end of last year. I don't know if you guys are following that story at all, but to the listeners, but definitely like a good use case. Like things like that scare people off, right? Because it looks like Bitcoin is this thing where it's like, oh, I put all this money in and it went poof into thin air. And that's not what happened. What happened is that there was a layer of understanding that was missed, which is that you don't own the Bitcoin until you own the keys. And that's kind of like, that will segue into just the sheer importance of self-custody.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think a good segue, we've been using the word keys, right? What's that mean exactly?
Yeah, great question. So, really, what a Bitcoin key is just secretive information. So, it's going to be randomly generated. That's the most secure way to create a Bitcoin key. It's going to be randomly generated information. And then that information can be used to securely receive Bitcoin into a Bitcoin wallet. And then it can also be used to approve spending Bitcoin out of that wallet. So Bitcoin keys, if you're someone who wants to take that next step and bring your Bitcoin into self-custody and hold your own keys, there's a few different ways to do that. So you're going to have to generate, you're going to do a random generation of Bitcoin keys for your custody. Now, you could do that on just like your phone or your computer. There are programs and wallets that let you do that very easily. But that would be considered a hot wallet because if your key is generated on a machine like a computer or a phone that can connect to the internet, you don't really have the peace of mind that that key is not exposed to the internet. And so that's a good model to maybe test self-custody for the first time, maybe send a little bit of Bitcoin into a hot wallet that you just created for free and really easily. But it's not good for like a large amount of Bitcoin because you don't have that peace of mind that your key is safe. So luckily, we have these tools that are most commonly called hardware wallets, which isn't necessarily the best term, but that's the most popular one. And these are like, people may have heard of like Trezor, Ledger, Cold Card. They're just like physical electronic tools that are separated from your phone and your computer, and they can randomly generate your key inside the device. And then there's ways you can back up that information so that if your hardware wallet gets damaged, then you're still okay. And then you can safely interact with that device in conjunction with your computer to send and receive Bitcoin a lot more securely. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I kind of wanted to share just like a simple analogy for this that I always think of, using a hot wallet or a software wallet. So, an app on your phone, essentially, right? You're still taking self custody of that as long as you're using self-custodial hot wallets. But it's kind of like carrying cash in your wallet, right? You're not going to be carrying your life savings around with you to the grocery store, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of your chump change spending money. And then you've got this USB stick looking thing that's your hardware wallet, your cold storage option that, you actually can use similar to like a safe in your home, right? Where you may be storing higher dollar items that you want to keep private and safe and secure, right? Is that pretty good, analogy between those two?
That's perfect, actually. Yeah. So, what a lot of people do is exactly what you said. They'll kind of have like two models for keeping their Bitcoin. They're going to have like a very secure option, which we'll get to in a little bit, for the majority of their Bitcoin wealth. But the security comes at the cost of maybe a little bit of convenience when it comes to sending and receiving. Just a wallet on your phone is going to be very convenient to transact with your friends and stuff. So then you can keep like maybe a smaller amount of Bitcoin in that kind of model for convenience, but it's lower security.
Gotcha. So, did you have something to add, Jason?
No, I think it all makes sense. I guess maybe just like, so walking through the process of sending and receiving Bitcoin with your cold wallet, right? It's a little USB looking thing like Alec mentioned. You plug it into the computer. If you use something like Ledger, there's also like a software that you kind of, integrate with as you plug that into the computer. At what point, like, I'm trying to think of how to phrase the question in the best way. At some point, you connect to the internet to send and receive the Bitcoin, and then you disconnect. So, where does where does the layer of security become added? Probably in that, my guess is that you're not constantly connected to the internet with, again, to Alex's point, like all of your life savings, right? Once you disconnect, you've gone cold again. But while you're connected, you're in. I feel like I'm phrasing this poorly, but you understand. You're nodding, so that's a
Yeah,
good
yeah.
sign.
No, this is a fantastic question. So, yeah, a lot of people, they see, the device, they understand what it's for, but then they also recognize, well, I'm plugging it into my computer. So is it like really offering security? So yeah, how it works is that you are typically going to have an interface on your computer to interact with. It's going to show you like the balance of your wallet. It's also going to have buttons for send and receive. And let's say you do receive some Bitcoin into that wallet, and then you want to actually withdraw it or send it out. Okay. So, what that's going to look like is that first, you're going to author up a transaction. So, you're going to like click withdraw or send, and it's going to ask you some questions like how much Bitcoin do you want to send, and like what address do you want to send it to? Where's it going? But now that transaction needs to be signed by the key in order to be valid. So we're talking about a cryptographic signature here. And the Bitcoin network is going to reject it if it doesn't have the appropriate signature from the appropriate key. So now what you've got to do is, if you're using like a hardware wallet, you've got to send that unsigned transaction that you've created over to the device. And then the device is going to internally use that private key to basically stamp it or sign it. And then it's going to send the signed version of the transaction back to your computer. So the actual private key itself stays within the device. It never goes to your computer. And these devices are built to, be resistant for the private key ever going to your computer. And in fact, a lot of devices like this have like an open source model where people can really look into how that is done. But all of the most popular manufacturers do that well.
That's awesome, man. That perfectly answers the question. And just to recap for my own understanding, so let's say I got a Ledger, right? I plug it in, my Ledger Live opens up. On my computer, on the Ledger Live software, I'm telling it, hey, I want to send 1 Bitcoin to Alec at this address. Then it says, okay, we're going to do that. We're going to send 1 Bitcoin. It kicks it back to my actual ledger device, the USB looking device, and it's stamped with a signature. And that all happens within that device. It is then sent back to my computer where the transaction is finalized and carried out with that stamp never leaving that device. And that's the layer of security you get from using these devices.
100%. Yeah, you got it. So now, one thing that kind of causes people to have a little bit of anxiety over self-custody is the fact that you're responsible for keeping track of this device, right? What happens if you lose your little USB stick, so to speak? People lose things all the time, right? People lose passwords, people lose sunglasses and car keys. So a lot of people don't trust themselves to keep track of a Bitcoin key, even if they know that it's something that's really important. So that's a very valid concern, but luckily there are other models that can be used to make it so that you can make mistakes without losing your funds. So what we've been talking about up to this point is called single signature or single sig. That's where you need one private key to put that stamp or signature on the transaction for it to be valid. Okay, but there's also multi-sig or multi-signature. And that means you can create like a Bitcoin wallet where in order to withdraw funds out of it, multiple keys or one out of a set of keys can be or are required to sign the transaction in order to spend the funds. So that opens the door for a lot of cool things. Number one, if you just have like one key, not only are you kind of at risk of just maybe losing it yourself, but also if someone manages to steal it, they might be pretty close to being able to steal your Bitcoin, right? But you can create a Bitcoin wallet where, for example, 2 keys are needed to approve sending Bitcoin out of your wallets. And then you can maybe keep those keys in 2 different locations. And so if someone, gets into your home and they find one of your keys, they still don't have all the information they need to spend your Bitcoin. And to elaborate on that a little bit further too, I should say that multi-sig, you can kind of set whatever quorum you want in order to spend the Bitcoin. So it's called M of N, which maybe sounds a little technical, but it's like a number of a number. Okay, so it's like single sig, there's one key that exists and you need one key to spend the funds. So it's a 1 of 1. All right, you could create a 2 of 2. So there's 2 keys, you need signatures from both. But you can also do 2 of 3. So there's 3 keys and you can grab any combo of 2 out of those keys to spend the Bitcoin. You can do 3 of 5. You can really do whatever you want. And if you have something like a 2 of 3, that allows you to, like, if one of the keys gets completely lost or destroyed, you can just use the other 2 keys, right? You have that reaction time if something goes wrong to fix things without losing your Bitcoin. You can use the other 2 keys to maybe move your Bitcoin into a new wallet where you have all the pieces again. Are you with me on that?
I'm with it. Suppose I've got 2 of 2 set up and I lose 1.
Yeah, so that would not be
Get
good,
out of
right?
luck. Get out of luck.
You're out of
Yeah,
luck.
so 2 of 2 is not a popular quorum. 2 of 3 is extremely popular. 3 of 5 is pretty popular. At Unchained, we teach people how to do 2 of 3. The 2 of 3 model removes all single points of failure. Okay, single points of failure are a problem with single sig, and they would be a problem with like a 2 of 2, for example.
Yeah, kind of the biggest risk factor is yourself. So 2 of 3 is really nice if you have, a third party or 2, holding these. I'm sure we can get into like how you want to hold those keys separately. I did have one question that kind of backtracks, but segues into this. We're talking about like losing keys versus the device, right? So your Bitcoin's not actually stored on the USB stick hardware
Mm.
wallet, right? So you lose that. You're fine as long as you have the key phrase, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That's also why a little earlier I mentioned that hardware wallet is maybe not the best term, because it paints a picture in people's minds that their Bitcoin is going to be going into the device and that's where it lives. That's not true. All Bitcoin exists on the Bitcoin blockchain, right? It's basically out on the internet. And maybe a good analogy for this is, like, you can imagine that out there on the blockchain, you have a bunch of treasure chests that hold Bitcoin inside of them. And that's like a wallet. And then what your device is like a key for unlocking a lock on a treasure chest. So the single signature model would be a treasure chest with one lock protecting it and one key that fits into that lock. A 2 of 3 multi-sig would be like a treasure chest that has 2 locks protecting it. And then there are 3 keys that exist. And, you can use, it's maybe not a perfect analogy, but you can grab any 2 out of the 3 keys to unlock those locks.
Yeah. And the key itself is typically, that's interchangeable with the term seed phrase, right? Which we hear a lot, which is
Yeah.
like a random combination of either 12 or 24 words. And a lot of times, like with the ledger setup, you're given like 3 paper cards to write these words down on, and it's like, good luck, don't lose them.
Yeah, I'm glad you got me back on track with that. So yeah, you're right. The device is not the only component. When you set up one of these things, your key is randomly generated, like we talked about. And then while you're setting it up, it's going to have you write down some words. And there's going to be a provided card for you and everything if you buy one of these devices from the manufacturer. It's going to be like 12 words or 24 words. There's different ways of doing it, but those words are like a representation of the private key information, and they're equivalent, really. So the point of writing down these words, which are called the seed phrase, is that if your device deteriorates or breaks, right, you can just buy a replacement, and then you can actually load in your words into the replacement device, and you'd be back up and running with the exact same key that you had before. So this applies whether you're doing single sig or multi-sig. You really have the key, which is the information written on paper or stamped into steel, perhaps. And then you've got the actual electronic device, which is kind of just a tool to be able to safely interact with that information as well as the internet. It's like a bridge, a safety bridge between your seed phrase and the internet.
The device is the hand inserting the key into the lock and turning the key. I'm trying to follow the analogy. I'm trying. But that's funny. I'm really glad we clarified all that, because as I was setting up, my hardware wallet for the first time, Alec was helping me with that. Shout out Alec. And he literally had to like stop and like ground me like twice. Like, Jason, the Bitcoins are not leaving the computer going into this tiny little device. That's not happening. This is just the device that utilizes the keys. It's the medium by which you use the keys. So really, really good clarification there. So Tom, I'd like to touch on like what Unchained does. You guys enable the onboarding process for folks like myself who are too stupid to know how to set up multi-sig, because I have no idea where to start with that. I'm currently using single sig, and you kind of help that onboarding process. And in doing so, instead of having one 24-word seed phrase, I then have, for example, 3 24-word seed phrases, 2 of which in the example you gave would be required to send and or receive Bitcoin.
Yeah, let's get into that next. So if someone's interested in setting up a multi-sig wallet, perhaps a 2 of 3, which I would say is kind of the sweet spot for most people, you could do that on your own. You could go out and get some devices, generate some seed phrases, write them down, and use some free and open source tools on your computer to put it all together. But it is a little bit technical. A lot of people are new to Bitcoin. They might not be comfortable with that. And not only that, if you put a lot of your Bitcoin into that structure and then God forbid something happens to you, is your family going to be able to figure it out? So yeah, Unchained is there to teach people how to set this up, this 2 of 3 multi-sig, and we call them our vault product. And we not only help people set it up, but we're a partner alongside our clients to answer technical questions. And we believe that Bitcoin is an asset for generations, and we have an inheritance protocol so that even though this is, maybe a little bit of a complicated structure, we make it really easy if something were to happen to you for your family or your heirs to recover the Bitcoin. Now, you mentioned that you're going to be holding multiple pieces in this kind of a structure, right? Because there's several keys involved. Now, in a 2 of 3, there are 3 keys involved. But with an Unchained vault, how it works is that the client will hold 2 keys, and then Unchained holds the 3rd key. So what's interesting about that structure is that with us only holding 1 key out of the 3, if we use that treasure chest analogy, we could only unlock 1 lock, right? So even we cannot unlock the treasure chest and open the lid by ourselves and mess around with people's Bitcoin. Even if the government was trying to force us to do something like that, it's impossible. On the other hand, with the client holding 2 keys, they can unlock both locks to their treasure chest, by themselves. Unchained could actually, something could happen to us and people would still be able to recover their Bitcoin if they had the information. So really, with our clients holding 2 keys, they are responsible for keeping track of 4 physical items. So there's going to be 2 devices, like the Trezor, Ledger, Cold Card. Those are the devices we specifically support. And then the 2 devices each have a corresponding seed phrase. So there's going to be 4 items to keep track of. And then if someone loses all 4 pieces, then, all that's left is our key. We would not be able to help someone in that situation. So there is still some personal responsibility. That's kind of unavoidable if you're going to be doing self-custody. But what's cool about this structure is that, let's say you got your 4 items and you lose 3 out of the 4, okay? You have 1 piece left. Maybe it's one of your seed phrases. You could load that seed phrase into a new device that you purchased, and you could unlock 1 lock to the treasure chest. We could use our backup key to unlock the 2nd lock. And then, we can rescue your Bitcoin, move it to a new treasure chest or wallet where you have all the pieces again. So our model really allows people to make mistakes, several substantial mistakes, without losing their Bitcoin, which is, a phenomenal advantage. But, in the interest of avoiding losing all 4 pieces, we do always recommend that people kind of spread out their different pieces, their different items in different locations. So don't keep all your keys at home. If there was a natural disaster, you could lose them all together. So does that make sense?
Yeah, that's honestly one of my favorite things is if you're worried about taking self custody, you were right, that self responsibility aspect is not going away. There's still going to be some of that, but it makes me so much more comfortable knowing that my, all this wealth that I'm storing in Bitcoin, if I were to lose one of my keys and I was doing single sig, I'm out of luck. But in the Unchained multi-sig, I just hit you guys up. Hey, bail me out. You got my other key. I got one. Right. Let's set up a new one. That's honestly the coolest thing. I actually need to set up another vault with y'all. Speaking of this, but yeah, Jason, Any questions specifically around that?
No, this is super helpful. This is like way more than I've learned on this topic up to now. So Tom, like thank you so much. And as I'm listening to this, I'm really like, man, I got to get on this. So we will need to keep talking after this episode, I think. I do have a question. So, like many others, maybe who already are self custodians using a Ledger wallet, I'm considering the possibility of getting a different hardware wallet. So, I've got my seed phrase with my Ledger Nano. Let's say I go buy a cold card, right? Now I've got to go set up a new seed phrase. I've got to move things from that wallet to this one. I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. What happens if in the interim, while I've still got my Ledger, you know, I hit you up and I say, hey, Tom, let's set up Multi-Sig. I really need to get on this right now. I've got too much sitting in there. I'm just not comfortable with it. We set everything up. Then I go buy another wallet a year from now, 6 months from now, whatever. Do you guys help me kind of get everything all transferred over into that new vault as you were discussing it? And like what, like kind of, is that a labor intensive process or how does that look?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to mention that if someone wants to use an Unchained vault and set one up, the price is zero. It's free to do if you feel comfortable like learning how to do it on your own. But we also offer concierge onboarding, which would, cost money, but then an expert like myself, I do concierge onboardings, will get on a one-on-one call with you and get your multi-signature vault all set up properly, answer all of your questions. And then at the end, if you want to practice moving some Bitcoin from wherever it is into your new vault, we assist with that for sure. We can be there with you and following along with all the steps if you like. Now, your specific question, if you like have Bitcoin in like a single signature setup with a ledger, let's say,
Yeah.
and then you get another key for your multi-signature vault, you can continue to you can use that ledger as one of the keys to your vault in addition to that second key. It's not going to affect your funds in the single signature setup. So you can sort of imagine it like you have a treasure chest with a lock and a key or single signature. It's got Bitcoin in there. And then what you'd be doing with Unchained is just building a new treasure chest off to the side that your new cold card is one of the keys. We hold a key, and then that ledger can also be a key. So it's like you can have the same key be able to unlock different locks on different treasure chests. And then it would simply be a normal Bitcoin transaction to move your Bitcoin on the single signature over to the multi-signature. It'd be very easy. If you were asking about like swapping out a key for a multi-signature vault, that's also possible. We assist with that too. Like if you set it up with a ledger and then you're like, you know what, I don't like ledger, I want to use a different brand of device, you can swap it out. Actually, there needs to be some signature approvals, cryptographic signatures of the keys in order to do that, but we assist with that as well. Yes.
Okay. So I mean I could go set everything up, get on a multi-sig operation with my ledger. 6 months from now I decide, yeah, I got to get off of ledger. I want to go to something a little more, advanced like a cold card. You guys can assist me in kind of maybe not seamlessly, but much more easily kind of get that all set up on my new cold card.
Yeah, absolutely. We do one-on-one calls for pretty much any questions anyone has on anything. That's our premium support and our concierge onboarding. We also have a lot of free resources on our website, unchained.com. We have a blog that teaches people about Bitcoin concepts, a lot of great articles there. We also have a knowledge base that kind of gives written instructions for doing a lot of this on your own. So, but yeah, we're always happy to help on a one-on-one basis.
Love it. You guys are out there doing the Lord's work. I love it.
It's honestly amazing because like I've been in Bitcoin for a while now, 2021, right? I feel pretty comfortable. I've built my own node sitting right over here. You know, I've messed around with multiple different wallets, but I'm still not comfortable doing multi-sig by myself. So I would imagine for the fresh, newer person, like, this would seem so scary. So it's a like, it just shows the massive value that Unchained is providing to, like, the industry and the world, and, well, I guess you guys probably just service the US right now, but will be the world in general, just around self-custody. Like, you don't have to be a Bitcoin expert to start saving in Bitcoin, right? It can seem scary. It can be intimidating. You got to take this self responsibility. You don't want to mess it up. Like, thank God we have companies like Unchained that can help us with that, right?
Yeah, we're trying to do everything in the right way, play the long game, right? We're not a custodian. We don't hold people's Bitcoin. We're a navigator. We're an educator. We help teach people how to set up self custody, and it's a blast. I get to talk to Bitcoiners all day long. It's like the best job in the world, really. And yeah, I invite any listeners who are interested to go to unchained.com and take a look and see if it's right for you.
Awesome. I
Love
mean,
it.
on that note, I know we talked about, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Jason.
No, you're
just
good, man. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask about some of the other products that Unchained offers. Like, I know now I can set up a vault with you, but you guys are doing, retirement options, loans, things like that, right?
Yeah, so our IRA vaults are maybe our most unique product because it allows you to hold Bitcoin in the exact same structure, a 2 of 3 multi-sig vault that you hold 2 keys to and we hold 1 key to, but it's in that, tax advantaged IRA account. Typically, if you want to hold Bitcoin in an IRA, you're going to have to use a custodian that's going to hold that Bitcoin, or you're going to have to do something like a self-directed IRA, which can be kind of confusing to set up and it comes with problems of its own. So as far as I know, the Unchained IRA product is really the only way to hold your own keys to Bitcoin in a very like simple and streamlined way. So we do that for like both traditional IRAs and Roth IRAs, and we walk people through how to move money from their existing like IRA or 401k into their multi-sig vaults. So that's one really cool product. We also do Bitcoin backed loans in a responsible way, right? We saw last year there were some Bitcoin loan businesses, Celsius, BlockFi, drop their names in here. And what they were doing was rehypothecating. Okay, so people would put Bitcoin in and then they would actually take that Bitcoin and like lend it out again, and it just spirals out of control. But with an Unchained loan, again, 2 of 3 multi-sig, it's a little bit different because the client holds 1 key, we hold 1 key, and a third party arbitrator holds 1 key. And then Bitcoin is deposited basically as collateral, right, in order to receive dollars for a loan. This is very popular with people that have, a substantial amount of Bitcoin. Maybe it's gone up in value a lot since they bought it, and they want to utilize that purchasing power to get, a car, house, whatever. But they don't want to sell the Bitcoin because that would be capital gains tax and stuff. So this way you can get dollars for your Bitcoin, and then you just pay back the loan normally. You get the Bitcoin back, and the whole time the legal rights to the Bitcoin stay in the name of the client. That's a big difference between how we're doing it versus those other models that failed. And then also, since it's just sitting on an address in a multi-sig vault, you can just verify on the blockchain that the Bitcoin is there. It's not being used for other things. It's just sitting there as it should be.
That's awesome. Honestly, because I've wondered about that. Like, Bitcoin goes up in value, and say most of my funds are in that, and I'm like, even from just like the capital gains thing taken out, which is a really smart point to bring up. But say I just like want to go put down a down payment for a home or something like that, but I don't necessarily want to go and dump my coins to do that. Like this is a really, really cool alternative that I personally don't know of any other way to do something like that outside of this company.
Yeah, not only like the capital gains issue, but like if you did sell your Bitcoin, right, for dollars, and you go out and you put that down payment on the house, and then you want to get that Bitcoin back later, what if the price is skyrocketed, right? Maybe
Yeah.
you're going to have no hope of getting that amount of Bitcoin back. But with this model, you just pay back your loan, you get the exact same amount of Bitcoin back.
Yeah, it's like the opportunity, the fear of the opportunity cost. And I'm so glad this got brought up, because that is something I've been directly thinking about as I approach that time where I'm looking to buy a home. And I'm like, man, like taking, $10,000-$12,000 out in my Bitcoin would kind of suck, because yeah, like, as I go to replenish that, what if it's a bull run and like every day that the price is just climbing steeper and steeper? So this is such a cool alternative that enables you to still capitalize on that and get both benefits there.
Yeah, any given day, we might see that the price will never be this low again, right? So, yeah,
We
exactly.
hope.
Yeah. I mean, that's just one of those principles you hear from like all the, wealth gurus out there. Like rich people don't like spend their own money. They get loans off their assets. And what Bitcoin enables you to do is be like those ultra wealthy people. Like maybe you don't have $1 million building you can pull a loan off of, but maybe you bought Bitcoin, hodled for 5, 10 years, and it's worth a substantial amount now. You can loan off that. It's the same tools just being, provided to the average person, which is the power behind this technology, right?
Exactly.
Well, I don't know. I don't have any other questions. You got anything else, Jason?
I don't. I've learned a ton, Tom. I can't thank you enough, man. Like, this is all super interesting to me. Like I said, I do plan for our conversation to continue beyond this episode in the way of multi-sig. I think the loan thing is super cool. I know it was kind of tossed in there at the end as just another product, but it just showcases like the level of commitment and dedication that Unchained has to go out into the world and like make some pretty revolutionary changes, because you don't see these things available elsewhere. You don't see like, and if you do, to your point, it's a model that's failed and it's dangerous, or there's rehypothecating going on. And again, every time that happens, it's tragic, because you got this wave of people who are just like getting warmed up to Bitcoin, and they see that mass failure, and they're not even going to look at it again for 5, 6, 7 years, because it's a traumatizing thing and it looks so dangerous that it's like, oh, another crypto exchange found, spending customer funds or reloaning customer funds. And I just got to appreciate like that you guys see that happening in the world, and you're so proactive to solve that and make something substantial and safe for people. Like, that's huge, man.
Yeah, it's interesting when FTX and Celsius and BlockFi was all happening last year and stuff. A lot of like the crypto industry was in serious distress, but our phones are ringing off the hook because people are like, I want to learn how to hold my keys, with some urgency here. And so, you have the right, if you have the right business model, you can thrive in all environments in this industry.
Love it.
Awesome. Well, Tom, why don't you tell us? I know you write some articles, you got your own site and stuff. So why don't you tell, everyone listening, where to find you online, any of your resources, and if they're interested in Unchained, like how they get in touch with you guys.
Yeah, the best way to start with Unchained is just unchained.com. That's our website. We have all the details about our products there, and you can get free consultations with a team member to ask further questions before you actually like plunge into it. I write some articles that are on the website. I also post my articles and other works on my personal website, which is just tomhonzik.com. I'm on Twitter at Tom_Honzik. I take like week-long breaks at a time a lot, but yeah, I am there and I try to post what's new.
You're busy building. You don't have to be on Twitter every day.
Right.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for the time, Tom. I learned a ton. I know Jason learned a ton, and hopefully everyone watching takes a lot away from this. So thank you again. And yeah, we'll hopefully chat with you again soon.
Yeah, my pleasure. Nice conversation. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Today I Learned Bitcoin. I really hope you learned something today or at least have a takeaway. We would appreciate if you help us beat these algorithms, share our content. If you found something valuable, I guarantee your friends and family will as well. Like and follow the page, subscribe on YouTube, wherever you're listening. Please support the show. And we are always looking for guests. If you are passionate about something in Bitcoin and want to come on and teach us about it, we would love to have you and love to spread the word and knowledge around Bitcoin. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you all next time.